spinning from the deaths of the notorious Nucci crime family after it was alleged that the Nuccis were one of the last criminal organizations linked to his family's death.
Get y'all into school. I'll take care of you. Get y'all into school, please. Thank you.
A bearded man named Frank Castle, shirtless inside his apartment, walks past a murder wall covered with photos of different people crossed out with red X marks. Frank then begins doing pull-ups as blood runs down his fingers while he screams and growls in pain. He continues doing pull-ups until he can no longer lift himself, eventually falling hard onto the ground. He quickly gets back up, grabs a handful of pills, and starts chewing them. He then drinks liquor straight from the bottle like water. Soon after, he begins throwing up violently. Afterward, he gets up and stands in front of a mirror. Moments later, he punches the mirror and shatters it completely. He proceeds to scream as he tears the photos off the wall, ripping everything down in anger. In Little Sicily, violence has broken out. The city has descended into complete chaos as gangs roam the streets and murders happen everywhere. People react by setting fires across the neighborhood. Fights break out constantly, and innocent people are killed left and right. A homeless old man walks through the streets shouting for people to stop. He is holding his dog, Camel, while quietly singing to himself. Eventually, he sits down at a corner, but soon a group of men approaches him. One of them suddenly kicks him in the face before taking the old man's hat and wearing it, while the others cheer and laugh. The man then grabs the dog and starts walking away. The old man desperately pleads with him to put his dog down, but the man ignores him. Moments later, a truck drives by from behind, and the man cruelly throws the dog into the moving vehicle, killing him instantly. The old man breaks down sobbing in grief. At the same time, Frank, alone inside his apartment, begins to mentally unravel as he mutters about a choice he made when he became a reconnaissance Marine and accepted the burdens that came with that life. His mind starts producing visions from his former life as old military companions appear before him. He continues spiraling further and eventually begins cutting into his own chest. Soon after, his friend Curtis appears and asks him what is wrong, telling Frank that whatever he needs, he is there to help.
I think I need some help.
Frank finally admits that he needs help, but Curtis suddenly disappears, leaving him alone once again. Frank then gathers his weapons, places them carefully into a bag, and locks them away. Frank then goes outside.
Guess he does come out after all.
At a nearby cafe, a father named Dre is talking with his daughter Charlie while selling pastries and coffee. Suddenly, a man barges inside and starts yelling, demanding some of what Dre is selling.
Ready? I'm like, don't cut the line, just wait right there.
Dre calmly tells him not to cut the line and to wait for his turn. When it is finally Frank's turn, the man begins causing a scene again. Dre eventually forces him out of the cafe while reassuring his daughter that everything is okay.
You don't need no coffee, you need medication.
Debbie, where's my blue pen?
He then offers Frank a free coffee because of all the commotion, but Frank pays anyway before walking out. As he walks through the city, chaos surrounds him everywhere. A man screams in the distance, people fight openly in the streets, police cars burn in flames, and gunshots echo through the city while Frank silently walks through it all. Soon after, Frank goes to the graveyard where his wife and children are buried. Once there, he sits down and places the key to the locker, holding his weapons onto the ground. He begins speaking emotionally to his wife and daughter, eventually breaking down in tears as he tells them he no longer knows what to do and that he is tired of everything.
I'm tired.
He then pulls a gun from behind his back and presses it against his head while apologizing to his daughter. Suddenly, a vision of his daughter appears, calling out to him. After seeing a series of painful memories and images of his family, Frank screams as he struggles to gather the courage to end his life.
You okay, Daddy?
When he finally opens his eyes, he sees his daughter standing there asking if he is okay. Shocked, he quickly hides the gun as she waves at him, but moments later, she disappears. Furious and heartbroken, Frank begins shouting for her to come back as he cries uncontrollably. He then starts walking through the streets while visions of his friend Curtis appear beside him, asking whether God would ever forgive them for the things they had done. As Frank keeps walking away, Curtis continues asking him what his purpose is now.
You think God's gonna forgive us for the things we've done, Frank?
But the moment Frank turns around, Curtis has disappeared. As he continues walking, he suddenly sees another version of himself walking beside him. The moment he turns to look directly at him, the figure vanishes. Frank eventually returns to his apartment building, but just before reaching it, a woman calls out to him. When he turns around, he sees an old woman named Ma sitting in a wheelchair with a bodyguard standing behind her, watching him closely. She tells Frank that she needs his help and asks if she can tell him a story.
Can I tell you a small story?
But Frank says nothing and simply starts walking back toward his apartment. The woman continues speaking, telling Frank that she lost her entire family just like he did, and that she understands how lonely a man can become. She first tells him about her husband Benny, who was killed after coming home and spending time around the pool with another woman. Men walked up to him and shot him in the head. Then came her eldest son, Bobby, a police officer who solved cases nobody else could solve. While spending intimate time with a woman, he was brutally butchered and killed. After that was Eddie, who had a family of his own. As he was entering a restaurant, he was suddenly shot dead, while his son watched helplessly from inside.
It's a real joy to watch your children bear fruit.
Lastly, there was Carlo, the one she called her prince. Unlike the others, he never dirtied his hands and was known as the smart one in the family. She tells Frank that Carlo was sitting in the car beside his mother when the clock struck 6:47, a time forever burned into her memory.
I knew my sweet prince was wrong.
She describes how Frank dragged Carlo out of the car while she watched helplessly. Frank pinned him down with a knee against his neck and pressed harder, while Carlo tried to calm his mother, telling her it was okay and that he loved her. Frank then stomped on Carlo's head, killing him.
I love you, Ma.
The woman then rises from her wheelchair and walks toward Frank, telling him that he forgot about her before spitting on him in pure rage. She goes on to tell him that she has placed a bounty on his head and that every killer in the neighborhood now works for her because they are desperate for money and revenge. She warns him that at exactly 6:47 p.m., she will reveal his location to all of them and they will come for him without hesitation. She coldly tells Frank that she is the one who delivers punishment now.
Come on, Barry, let's get the out of here.
As she returns to her car, she promises him that she will personally watch him die. Frank then returns to his apartment and washes his face while thinking deeply about everything the old woman told him. As the water continues running and he slowly zones out, a woman suddenly asks him if he is scared.
You scared, Frank?
When he turns around, he sees Karen Page standing there. She begins telling him that he is not a victim and that he chose this life himself, almost blaming him for going back out the very next day after returning home from deployment.
Come home from deployment, out the door the next day, huh?
She tells him that he chose this violent life over his family. Karen continues by saying that being a father and husband was only a costume for him and that he failed the people who loved him most.
Failed your family and now you're failing the city.
Frank then starts seeing painful visions of his dead wife and Curtis telling him that he is a coward who failed both his family and his city. Soon, Frank completely breaks down emotionally and asks Karen if she is truly with him.
Karen, are you with me?
She softly tells him that she is always there for him before hugging him and saying that there is still more he has to do. She then quietly asks him what time it is, and in an instant she disappears, leaving Frank standing there alone once again.
Frank. Yeah. What time is it?
Frank then hears loud banging on his door. He slowly picks up the knife and moves toward it with careful steps. As he looks through the opening, he sees a masked man along with several armed men running through the corridor, shouting for him to come out and demanding to know where he is hiding. In front of Frank's apartment lives a mother with her young son. One of the armed men violently breaks her door open with an axe and storms inside while she screams for help in terror. Frank then looks down and notices a strange liquid seeping under his door and slowly spreading into his apartment. He begins to slowly back away from the door as he realizes what is happening, but then a lighter clicks open and fire immediately rushes toward him, spreading across the floor and catching his trousers and shoes. Frank screams in pain as he rushes forward and breaks through the door, crashing into one of the men and knocking him to the ground. Without hesitation, he begins fighting the attackers, one by one, with brutal force. He then forces his way into the woman's apartment and continues fighting like a man driven by pure rage. Inside, one of the men is on top of the woman, but Frank quickly stabs him in the neck, allowing her to break free. She immediately grabs her son and hides with him in panic. Frank continues taking down the remaining men, killing them one after another while using their own weapons against them. During the fight, one of the attackers throws a bomb at him, and Frank quickly throws it back into his own apartment before dropping down and covering himself as the explosion goes off behind him. Frank then moves out onto the balcony as chaos erupts around him. The entire building is in panic, with people screaming and running while armed men kill anyone they come across without hesitation. He quickly jumps down to the balcony of the next floor and continues fighting, killing attackers, while also trying to shield civilians caught in the chaos. After a long and brutal sequence of fighting and killing multiple armed men, he forces his way upward toward the rooftop. More men begin chasing him, armed with axes and guns, but he manages to fight every single one of them using whatever he can grab. During the fight, one of the men throws him with great force down to the next floor, and he lands hard on his back, groaning in pain. He slowly gets up, limping heavily, and walks toward the edge. Looking down, he sees Ma sitting in her wheelchair with her bodyguard standing behind her. As Frank looks back, he sees more armed men rushing toward him. With no time left, he jumps and lands on a wooden platform attached to the outside of the building. One of the attackers follows him and jumps as well, but falls all the way down to the ground. Frank coughs blood but forces himself back up and walks toward Ma. She quickly rushes into her car as he continues fighting off men on the ground. He tries to follow her, but then he hears Charlie, Dre's daughter, calling out for her father. Frank freezes for a moment as Ma drives away into the distance. He then turns and runs toward Dre instead. Frank charges toward the cafe, killing several gang members along the way before taking a gun from one of them and rushing to Dre's side. He shoots the men who are brutally beating Dre outside the cafe and then forces his way inside, continuing to fight the remaining attackers. After killing everyone inside, he hears Dre's wife and daughter crying nearby. As he moves toward them, one final attacker rushes at him and stabs him in the chest. Frank reacts instantly, grabbing the man, flipping him over, and stabbing him repeatedly until he stops moving. Dre's wife thanks him through tears as Frank slowly walks toward the door. Charlie then runs up and hugs his leg tightly, refusing to let go. Moments later, Dre walks inside and calls for Charlie, pulling her into an emotional embrace along with her mother as they all cry together. Charlie then asks Frank to wait for her and runs off before coming back with a handmade flower, which she gently gives to him. Frank takes it without saying anything.
Thank you.
Dre and his wife thank him once more, but he simply turns and walks away. He steps outside and begins walking through the city while holding the flower in his hand. He eventually makes his way to the graveyard. There, he places the flower Charlie gave him on the ground as he speaks softly to his daughter, telling her that he met someone and that she reminded him of her. As he sits there in silence, he notices the key he had previously left behind. He stares at it for a moment and then sits down beside it, quietly saying that maybe he wants to keep going after all.
I think maybe you were with me today, baby.
Soon after, a woman and her husband are walking through the street while talking. One of the gang members suddenly almost hits the woman, but Frank appears and strikes the man from behind before anything happens.
One is can, the other one is peach.
He is now wearing a suit with a fresh haircut and a more composed look. He calmly picks the man up and removes the hat from his head before handing it back to a homeless man, the same one it was originally taken from earlier.
Yo, devil dog, that cover's mine.
The homeless man looks at Frank and tells him that it is not the only thing he took from him, before the attacker suddenly breaks free and runs away. Frank reacts quickly, throwing his knife and stabbing the man in the back. He then walks up to him and fires a shot, killing him instantly.